Hi guys, good afternoon. Welcome to a Trustpilot webinar, The Future of Customer Care, with our good partners, technology partners, Gnatta. So speakers today are going to be myself, Neil Bayton, Partnership Director at Trustpilot, sort of like the liaison between myself and our technology and agency partners, and Jack Barmby, CEO of Gnatta.
So I just wanted to go over probably before we get into it, how Gnatta fits into the customer care journey, our relationship with with Trustpilot and how that works. So essentially, Gnatta acts as a centralising point for all of your customer contacts. So taking in reviews, emails, texts, web chats, social messages, a whole myriad of digital channels, and pulls all of those conversations into Gnatta. We then integrate with all of your external systems or internal systems as they were, like CRMs or order management systems or workforce systems, and pull all of that data in. And then by hooking into AI and machine learning algorithms, we can kind of get a full picture at the point of contact of who that customer is, what that customer wants, and then based on your business rules, how they should be routed. So Gnatta sits as something that would an operating customer. And essentially we just work at the point of contact, how do we make that contact as effective, as efficient, and as positive as it possibly can be.
And Trustpilot, we're a customer review community. We're the largest in Europe. We help consumers make informed purchasing decisions and businesses to engage with their customers. We help businesses build trust and confidence in their brand. So now, these days, a brand is not what you tell your customers it is, it's what your customers tell each other it is. We have a great integration with Gnatta. The reviews pull into the Gnatta platform, and you can basically pull your reviews into a different workflow with your different digital touch points, whether that's your email or social, Facebook messages and what have you, into one workflow to one customer success team member, easily and seamlessly.
So before we go into sort of future movements, I think just wanted to kind of cover the importance of customer engagement more generally. First of all, now obviously customer engagement will connect you to your customer, and it will help you understand them, what they're finding positive and negative about the business to do iterative improvement. But also kind of gives you operationally kind of indicators as to what's going right and wrong, which is really, really important. As the USP for businesses kind of moves towards customer engagement more broadly as their differentiator, it's really important to make sure that you're understanding the profile of the customer. And one of the big pieces around the Trustpilot integration was, as one of the only integrations that we do that is absolutely tangible in its sentiment through its star rating, and it gives a real good indicator of that engagement level. Also, kind of from a social proofing element, over the last few years, especially in line with the Google algorithm change a couple of years back, social proofing has become a much more integral and sizable part of the kind of pre-sale journey. So as there's more touch points and more ways that a customer can understand how you deal with your clients pre, during and post sale, that becomes more and more important, from positive social proofing and negative social proofing as well, which Trustpilot is kind of a testament to.
The last 5 years have seen a big spike in customers transitioning to communicating and buying through digital channels. So if you can manage this change effectively, this will positively impact your business. Customer engagement allows your team to continuously improve the customer experience. So what's also important is knowing the sentiment your clients hold about your brand. So what reviews allow you to do is to segment those reviews into 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever it might be. So the people with 4 and 5 stars against your company, you might want to they become advocates of your business. They're right to cross-sell, upsell, and resell to these guys. Whereas your message to maybe someone who's more ambivalent might be a different message. So this might be trying to turn these guys around so they do become advocates of your business. So really, really important to actually analyze the content that's coming into your reviews and act and react positively, dependent on the sentiment that they hold towards your business.
And I think that's really important. I think to kind of expand a little bit on the expectations side of it, a piece I wanted to cover was that, you know, generically, customer engagement or service experience is seen as an overhead. And actually, if you change that around and start to think of it as a cost of sale, as it becomes a more integral part to the pre-sale journey, thinking of that as a cost of sale cost as opposed to an overhead cost, changes the way that the business would approach the importance of that aspect. Now, from an expectations perspective, it's really important to set them, make them absolutely clear, both, you know, for the SLAs as the business. But the big win is to exceed the expectations of what the customer was expecting outside of the SLAs that you guys would promise, and that's sort of where we kind of focus all of our energy to making sure that you can give an experience to the customer that is over and above kind of what they expected in the first place, which is really the kind of goal. So I wanted to cover, again, before we go into the future, the last piece on this is the importance of scaling successfully. It's quite it can tend to be a bit of an afterthought, both in terms of scaling up and scaling down. Operationally, you know, scale is something that businesses will always focus on, but going back to that overhead cost of sale piece, the customer care aspect can often become a bit of an afterthought, and actually can have quite a sizable impact on the journey. Now, when we talk about future, we're going to talk quite a lot about AI, and the scale argument. Actually, one of the big hinges behind that kind of future movement that we're going through at the moment is that technology can help solve that problem. You know, classically, if you look at retail industry, Black Friday is a massive scale up, and people will tend to start to plan for that, you know, a year in advance, and that's because the size of scale needed for kind of human growth element as you get towards that few weeks period is massive. Now, the technological advancements through AI and machine learning and all that sort of stuff has a massive swing to that actually you can manage scale much more effectively through those, instead of using human labour on its own. So
growing is an exciting time for a business, right? But it does come with its pains. So reviews can help. So reviews can be an early warning signal for your business that things are potentially, you know, might be a product or a service or whatever it might be that might need special attention. Also, maybe the number of reviews. So if you're receiving a number of negative reviews, that might be a good metric for you to know that now's the time to scale.
I think Gnatta's got a few really sexy pieces that can help with this sort of stuff as well. You know, if you look at taking conversations offline now, systems like Gnatta are really good at giving you a fuller picture of the customer's journey. So if you take what you'll get from Trustpilot, you'll get their review, some metadata about that review, and probably an email address as part of their account. Now, that gives you a good routing method into an offline channel. But actually, what if that customer using that email address had contacted you before, or maybe sent you a Twitter message, Facebook message, web chatted with you, gave you a phone call? There's normally a review is an endpoint to a journey, so the customer will have been through a service or bought a product from the business beforehand, and there's always a bit of a story as to why they've left that review. What we can do by taking them offline and into a centralized system like Gnatta is get a fuller picture of that customer, and then therefore give them a better experience. Same goes for the negative review piece. Using workflow methods, you can decide how certain types of reviews or certain subjects can be routed differently. And then from a copy and paste piece, you know, this is something that businesses tend to do separately on having content or canned responses, as they're widely known. But Gnatta's got a really sexy piece that can, based on the data that's available for that interaction, can dynamically suggest the correct content the operator would need to respond with if it doesn't go through a bot. And what that does is, it reduces that human error. And actually, if you go onto a Trustpilot page and filter by 1-star reviews, you won't find the same response being given over and over and over again. And I think that's really key for the part of the engagement bit, that it looks genuine.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we have a couple of best practices at Trustpilot of what we feel that you should do, and exactly what Jack just said about the canned responses. If you're putting the same response to every single 1-star review, if you're like me, a little bit of a cynic, you're probably going to filter by the 1-star reviews, and if you're seeing the same response each time, you'll know that's going to have a bad reflection on your business. So a couple of best practices. If you do receive a negative review, we have, contacts that you can be emailed, different contacts for different review content. So if it's a 1-star, you might want to go to your customer success team, or it obviously goes through the Gnatta program. Take it offline. Maybe calm down for 10 minutes before you actually respond, but pick up that phone, or take a different offline method, maybe an email or whatever it might be, and to try and rectify the situation. 9 times out of 10, a negative review can be turned around into a positive outcome. So have that conversation, open dialogue with your customers in something that you can go back and forward. Respond to every negative review. So like I say, these are the reviews that some people, if they're a little bit unsure about your company, your brand, they're going to be looking up those negative reviews. They want to see how you react. A negative review is the chance for you to rescue that customer, to learn from what you potentially might have happened and gone wrong. So yeah, respond to every negative reviews, and as we said earlier, don't copy and paste responses, because your responses are public. What I always recommend is to be proactive in reaching out. So don't have, them leaving you a review is them reaching out to you. Don't then say, please contact us on this number. You have their contact details in Gnatta, in Trustpilot. Reach out proactively. That's what they're asking for you to do. And also, as this review on the right shows, that was actually a negative review. They took it offline, they rectified the situation, they left a response, and then they've been able to edit that review back to a positive. So every single review can be edited and can be changed, so just keep that in mind when responding.
Okay, so we're here for the talk about the future of customer care, and the main topic that I wanted to cover off today, at least from the experience that we've got from the clients who work with the Gnatta, is around the automation in AI and how that actually fits into the journey now, and how we think that will fit into the journey in the future. Now, it's not the only major movement that's going on at the minute, but I think if you look at any sort of tech news or any trends, the arguments going on between Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, you'll see that AI is a bit of a hot topic at the minute, and there's a few reasons for that happening. And I think actually in terms of future, this is probably holding sort of the top spot in terms of change right now. So there's a bit of a difference between how I think AI is going to be used and how it is being used right now. Now, it's an absolutely fantastic bot that's out there right now. It works really, really well. The Pizza Express bot, I'm not sure if anyone's seen it, maybe five or so months ago now when they released it for the first time, that can help you order a pizza. Now, that's a really, really great bot. It works really well. It's really good, but actually isn't solving a problem that exists right now. Now, alluding to the kind of movement of the customer, generally, people are becoming, the amount of contact to a customer is increasing, not so much because service is depleting, but the amount of touch points and ways, methods and means that a customer can contact you is increasing. So generically, customer care is becoming a more expensive piece to control, piece to run, and piece to be efficient. And as not only that is happening, but also the expectations of the customer are getting tighter and tighter through the amount they expect you to have a connected conversation with them. They expect you to answer quickly. I read a piece that I'm not sure how trustworthy these stats are, but on average, a millennial has a shorter attention span than a goldfish. I'm not sure how true that is, but it kind of testaments to the fact that the expectations, especially in like UK culture, US culture, and these sorts of places are really starting to get to a point where they're very, very, very tight. Now, where automation and AI can fit into that journey is by replacing part of that contact with an artificial intelligence system. There are lots of them, and there's a couple of ones that are kind of proving their way at the minute. The first is something called NLP, or natural language processing, and what that essentially does is it can take a message and then tell you what that message is about. So I'm going to use the example of logistics. If you say, where is my order? There's a lot of ways to ask that question, but they all have the same base meaning of I want to know where that is. Now, what an NLP engine can do is tell the difference between where is my order and you're out of order, which is great. So as it fits into this journey, I think it's key to kind of introduce the term augmented intelligence, which is one of the terms being thrown around at the minute for a bot working alongside a human. Now, there's a very large proportion of people that have a very kind of doomsday feel to bots that they're going to kind of take over. Now, at least in this pass, in the next sort of 5 or so years, the way that it's being used most effectively that I've seen is a bot taking up part of that journey. Now, if we take that where is my order example, we can just use that natural language piece to say, okay, they're asking about an order, so we can make a more effective routing decision about that person. We could take it a step further and say, okay, both customers and businesses both tend to, most listening will probably have gone through a where is my order process before. You will give them your personal details, they will come back and probably copy some tracking information from a tracking system into the response, and then if you want another update, you'll probably go through that same process again. Now, a bot can get involved in any parts of that journey. The trick is kind of working out how much of that journey you should get involved in. So if you take the data protection piece, I need your order number and your email address or whatever that might be. A bot could automate just that piece. It could actually automate going and grabbing and retrieving the tracking update once that has been received back. It could even constantly give you updates as to when that tracking information changes. And different businesses have different comfort levels of how far, if any at all, involvement an AI system should have. But I think from even just looking at a customer perspective, this is something that is really grabbing hold at the minute as those attention spans narrow and the contact journey becomes more complicated through more frequent contact on more channels. Then AI really kind of slots in there quite nicely. There's some obvious advantages. It can answer much quicker. If you, I'll allude to this a little bit later, but if you look at even the quickest performing businesses in the world, they'll respond to you in minutes, some in hours, some in days. You're looking at seconds for a bot, and not very many of them either. So the amount of contact it can get through is much higher. And it's it also, in the bottom left point here, it doesn't require humans to run, and that's a negative again in part that we'll come on to later. It's one of the key pushbacks on AI at the minute, but actually when it comes to that scale up and scale down, it's a piece that can move very quickly because it's completely reactive in its nature, and it can replace a lot of the labour, which adds a lot of cost and complexity to that customer care operation.
I've got a quick question for you, Jack. Actually, it reminds me, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to put the questions in the control panel question tabs, and we'll answer them later. So we talked about the canned responses a little earlier. What if a brand was tempted to use AI to respond to something that you can't really do much about? So we talk about the pizza. The pizza turns up cold or late. Is there a way that you can respond by AI, but intelligently, to say, look, we're really sorry your pizza was late, but there was an accident on the A13 or whatever?
I think you've got to look at the context of the response that you're giving. So, the reason that AI, and from an augmented intelligence perspective, is good is because you're not entrusting the world to it, you're not entrusting every query to it, and to that end, it doesn't make very many mistakes. I think when you move to an emotive piece like a negative review on Trustpilot, certainly you can, but I think you need to just be absolutely certain that the response you're giving is helpful and relevant to that person. If you use the logistics example again, let's take November time and it's snowing, so there's a lot of failed deliveries because vans can't get out on the road. It's accurate that negative reviews could just automatically be responded to by a bot saying it's snowing, but having a lot of experience with this kind of work, if it wasn't snowing in Stockton on Tees that afternoon, then that customer's going to argue that point, and that's not helpful. So I think it's certainly a case that you can, but it's one of the main pieces on AI in terms of making sure that it is replacing a function that is helpful and is actually giving a helpful response, as opposed to just automatically sending responses back, which is kind of completely unhelpful. So I think it depends on the business. I think you could do it. I just think you need to have a lot of certainty that you're giving responses back that have context to them.
So how does Trustpilot fit into this journey? So how can we help? So Trustpilot have different ways, both manual and automated, to facilitate the review invitation process. So we can fit into your CRM, your ERP, your e-commerce platform, whatever it might be, to automatically send out a review invitation after a product or service has been consumed. And that could be, well, you really want it to be as soon after the purchase process as possible. Also, we have different rules in place to actually publish the reviews. So we have integrations in with Facebook, where actually you might want to amplify the good reviews. Now, you might want to amplify them all, but you might want to amplify the ones that are specifically good, where your customers are doing your marketing for you. So you can push those out to your digital channels. What you can also do is you can have certain rules to be able to push those into trust boxes onto your digital platforms, such as your website, especially if it's e-commerce. This could be really important where particular reviews talk about delivery. You might want to automatically push that through to a Trustpilot widget on your checkout page. And we have ways to actually pre-tag and post-tag, so actually as a little touch point as possible. A review will come in, it talks about, or it's about the London branch of your organisation because you tagged it as such when you sent the invitation. It then automatically gets pushed out to the page on your website that talks about your London operation.
And I think from a customer care perspective, I think that the Trustpilot guys kind of tack up post-purchase, getting that out. I think one of the pieces that's worth thinking about is how you can integrate reviews into the customer care journey post-purchase, past leaving the store, or as soon after the purchase as possible. Because a lot of the time, a lot of the clients that we work with base their Trustpilot not so much on the product that they're selling, but the service that they provide after the fact, and that's fine. But using being aware of that customer journey and having something that pulls them all together lets you make more intelligent decisions about how you give them the ability to leave feedback. So, for example, you've got a system like Gnatta that's pulling all that stuff together. Based on your rule sets that you can set up, you could invite a customer to leave a review under certain criteria being met. It could be that they had a really great experience with a web chat operator, and we want the guys to go and post about that experience on Trustpilot. Or it could be that actually they're looking for a way to vent their frustrations, and actually rather than trying to force them away from Trustpilot, you might say, look, if you do want to say something on there, then go and say it on the Trustpilot platform, and through a process take them to that journey. And then, as Neil alluded to before, even promoting people to go and post negatively, you then get that brand uplift by showing that turnaround, which you then go and do on the page. So through the journey, I think it's also key to try and think about how you can integrate a review system a bit more heavily to make that slick. Okay, then we're going to go through a couple of little stats next. Now, the first is that 48.5% of enterprises are using AI for automated communications according to Narrative Science. Now, when I first saw this, it seemed quite scarily high. I think that the reality of this is that there's elements of automation being used through the journey. I think it's in line with kind of what we said before about augmented. The parts of these journeys are being automated through the use of AI in part. If, for example, a natural language processing engine has a very light touch, it doesn't seem like you're talking to an AI bot. It's just that something AI has had an impact on that journey. I think it does speak volumes, though. I was even shocked by it that it's actually a lot further along the journey than we thought. We're talking about the future here, but if half of automated communications are using AI already, that's actually great news. But yeah, I think that's only due to rise, and actually as the competency of AI systems expands and becomes more accessible to the wider population, that number's just going to rise and rise. And then secondly, this is probably the biggest kind of discussion point around the negative parts of AI is around replacement of jobs. Now, 15 million jobs might be taken over by robots, according to the Bank of England's chief economist. Now, that's a pretty monumental figure. I kind of looked straight back to when I was having a look into this. I'd looked straight back at the thing that popped into my mind was manufacturing. So if you take into account, the movement from manufacturing plants being very manual to being very, very automated, I think I'll have to dig the stats out, but I do think that the number of job losses was comparable to where we're at right now. If you look at a study by PwC, they said by 2030, I think it's a mid 50%, maybe 56% of customer service or retail type jobs will be completely automated, which it's quite a scary figure if you think about the size of the retail industry in the UK. But I think that the biggest take into all of this is that there's certainly a possibility that the AI will be as disruptive as guys like this guy say so. But I think that the big hinge is on the economic impact. So if we're in a position where ultimately we're constrained by the education system and the economic system more broadly, that if we can't find a way to reskill and repurpose our workforce, that ultimately this can't really happen. We can't innovate ourselves into an economic crisis. And it'll be really, really interesting to see over the coming years how, while businesses are fighting to push down costs and increase experience by introducing artificial intelligence, how potentially policy changes from government, etc., will change the way that we can do that. Because ultimately, if by 2030 we're not ready to lose that percentage of retail jobs and jobs more widely, then that just physically can't happen. The other interesting part behind this, I took a look at stats outside the UK, and the predictions for the US are a little higher, I think about 8% higher, and also higher in Japan as well. So this is a pretty worldwide problem's not the right word, but this is a pretty worldwide kind of phenomenon going on at the minute, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how, as we continue to develop and make this more mainstream, accessible, and have it taking up more parts of the customer care journey, how economically we see pushback on that, and if we actually have to bottleneck our own innovation to remain stable economically.
So I talked a little bit about automation and Trustpilot a little earlier, but just going back to that, where with the invitation process, we integrate, as I mentioned, with e-commerce platforms and CRMs and stuff. But you can actually now dictate when you actually send the invitation. So very easily to set up. You can send certain invitations at certain times. So actually, if you find that Thursday at 9 o'clock in the morning is the best time to get a response, then why wouldn't you send most of your invitations at that time, as long as they're quite close to that purchase, the actual purchase. So it might be you want to split them up maybe twice a week or whatever it might be. And there's ways to analyse and report on this on the back end of Trustpilot, so you can find the best, the most efficient time to actually send out these reviews. We have automation in the scanning of reviews. So we have certain user guidelines, and if reviews don't adhere to the user guidelines, we scan them, and if someone mentions someone by name, derogatory, or puts a link in or whatever, we feel that it might be fake because it's come from a different country or it's been copy and pasted, whatever it is, we have an automated bot to do that. We've got other ways, clever ways that we're working on of how to actually collect reviews. So we're working with some Wi-Fi companies. So bricks and mortar, review, facilitating review process in store can be difficult. So we're working with Wi-Fi companies where you might have a big bricks and mortar store where someone might spend half an hour in your store, trying on some new ski boots or skis or whatever it might be. When you leave that store, you can actually be sent a review when you drop off their Wi-Fi, for instance, or maybe on e-receipts. So people use e-receipts now, typically to get their email addresses of people that shop in store. Actually, we can embed a link into that e-receipt so they can leave a review that way. Or obviously you then have that email address and you can then send them out an invitation at a different time. So different ways that we're using automation to make your life easier.
And I think to kind of cover off the AI piece, I just wanted to kind of recover and cover some new advantages and disadvantages. So probably start off on the left-hand side with the positives first. Just give that a second to stool up. There we go. So yeah, left-hand side first. So we kind of covered it before, but dealing with mundane tasks is a massive one. You take that DPA piece on those where's my order queries is a great example of how you can increase productivity and lower cost and increase experience for the customer as well. For things like that, there really is no downside. It's very, very safe to make those assumptions and understand that that's what you need to do. And it's a really, really, really great experience for the customer to get those responses back in seconds and reduce that time to resolution drastically. Faster decisions is also a key one. I kind of covered it above, but the AI engines will tend to respond to you in 5 or so seconds, depending on the system that you're using and the amount of calls it needs to do to make its decision. We're looking at seconds instead of industry best practice minutes and industry standard hours or hour, and even more commonly in days. And that's got to be a key. As the customer is driving businesses to make quicker, make more speedy responses to queries. If we can even take an aspect of that conversation and speed it up and take the number of handled queries by a human from 6 to 3 or even 6 to 5, we're having a massive impact on the experience felt by the customer. And then third of all is avoiding human error. We all know from contact center world that training, if you talk about, say Black Friday and the amount of training that you have to do to get people trained up and then, potentially lose a lot of those guys post-Christmas. And the amount of human error that exists in there as part of that training cycle is, well, from business to business, it can vary, but it's normally significant. And bots don't make errors because they don't make, well, effectively don't make choices. They're not biased, and that's quite a sizable upside. In terms of disadvantages, job losses has to sit at the top. It is going to inevitably replace a large amount of jobs. I read an interesting piece today, and I can't actually remember the company, but they use AI to facilitate their board meetings because it's unbiased, and there's some really strange applications being used at the minute, but job losses has to be one. And I think going back to that piece about the economy, I think you'll see that balance will come to, and ultimately it will be better for everyone. Once we can start to see what that looks like. The most interesting one I think was distribution of power. I went through, or I spoke really briefly about the Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg kind of public arguments going on at the minute. Mark Zuckerberg being very, very pro AI and thinking that there's a lot of AI pieces sitting in Facebook Messenger and Facebook more broadly at the minute. And Elon Musk got a bit of a doomsayer view that this is going to be a massive problem. Now, the reason for that is that, and if anybody wants to do some reading into this after the webinar, look into something called deep learning. Deep learning is a really interesting form of AI that doesn't need structured data to make correlations. So if I, in the bots that we use in Gnatta at the moment, and we use that where is my order query, I need to teach the bot about what where is my order means. But it doesn't know about types of cheese or breeds of dog. It doesn't understand that because it hasn't been explicitly taught that. Now, it takes a lot of data for a deep learning algorithm to learn this, but it can take unstructured data and start to make sense of it. Now, that's kind of learning, I'd even call them neurons, the pockets of data they use just like in a human brain. And the kind of worry about distribution of power is that, if you take a human child, they'll take, depending on your perspective, about 18 years to reach independent competency. But they learn slowly about, all of the different aspects of life, whereas a deep learning algorithm can learn much, much more quickly. And the argument coming from Elon Musk is effectively that as we move away from our AI being kind of quite separated from ourselves in, usually on a smartphone or on a computer, that as we move to neurally integrated AI, which is something he thinks is going to happen in the next decade or so, where you have AI algorithm kind of, or AI functionality kind of embedded straight into the brain, if it can learn quicker than you can and it can make connections quicker than you can, then there's an argument that the distribution of power is going to effectively, potentially damages as a race, is kind of the argument that Musk puts across, which is quite terrifying as a concept. But while at the minute it's helping us sort out DPA problems, it's not so problematic. But that may change. It's a real issue, like for sure. But I think again, I would hope we're intelligent enough as a race to stop that from becoming an issue. And then third of all is lack of judgment calls. Now it kind of connects to the avoiding human errors at the bottom and kind of coming out as a positive. But because they're not biased and because they don't technically make decisions per se, then there can be a bit of an issue with that. Neil talked before about should we respond to negative reviews through AI, and the answer is maybe, if you think that the judgment calls that come out the back of it are good. And I think that's kind of one of the big hinges and pushbacks on AI at the minute, that the reason that businesses are more comfortable to let a bot get involved in data protection gathering exercises is because it's less risky. And as you add more variation of the types of query that it can answer, the judgment piece becomes more difficult to track. But not from just a lack of judgment, but also kind of over-judging a situation. If you take that deep learning piece, there's every danger that again, if anybody has a large understanding of deep learning, I'd love to chat to it further. But let's say, for example, we pass on a load of data about a customer care operation, and a DL algorithm starts to assume that people called Neil complain a lot, and that may be true. But it may then choose to deal with people called Neil differently. And that's not a decision that a human would ever make, or at least I don't think so. So it's interesting on both sides of the coin how judgment calls can have an impact. But again, it's one to see. I think again we'll make those movements safely that work for business and customer alike, and so it shouldn't be a huge problem. I think it just needs to come out the wash as it develops.
Glad to know that we're not completely surplus into requirements. Just on that Musk Zuckerberg argument, didn't Facebook turn off their chatbot when it started developing their own language and they started talking to each other?
Yeah, there's been a few examples of chatbots that have become. There's another example, again I can't remember which it was, but that started becoming slightly racist or sexist as it started to make incorrect connections about certain types of people or classes of people, or however it makes those connections. And I think again it goes back to that judgment calls thing, that while we're answering data protection queries and we're using natural language processing to make better routing decisions, then great. But as we get to a stage where we're just entrusting it to go and have that entire conversation, I think that becomes much more of a risk. We can turn it off for sure, but again, under the distribution of power argument, there may come a time when that's not doable. But we'll see.
Cool, excellent, Jack. That's been really insightful, and I certainly enjoyed it. So thanks for listening, guys. that comes to the end. So I guess if anyone's got any questions, feel free to fill out on the control panel any questions, and we'd be happy to answer. If you can't think of anything now and you think of something in the future, feel free to email us. Our email address is there on the screen. We'd be happy to follow up with any questions you have. But have we got any coming in?
Yeah, Daniel would like to know, are there any potential dangers, such as with security, that need to be considered when involving AI?
Yes, there are, but there are some nice workarounds and some systems that can mitigate that. So one of the popular systems that's used at the minute is a system called Rainbird. I bet they didn't think I was doing this promotion for them on a webinar, but still. What Rainbird does, as an example, is when it makes a decision, it logs it and then gives you back a percentage certainty as to why it made that decision. So what Rainbird can do is it can do more complex process, like set up a bank account and then give you a recommendation on which type of bank account you should set up, and then gives you back a big kind of log of why it made those decisions to learn on. That doesn't mitigate the risk at all, but it does give you a bit of a kind of a net to work out why that happened. But again, it probably goes back to that judgment calls piece, that if you are using it for data protection stuff, then there's certainly that risk there. I think the other piece to add on that as well is that if you are collecting data protection kind of information, it's up to you what you do with that from there. In the examples that we use classically, we'll gather that data and then pass that data on to a person to deal with. So that's a lot less risky, because the human would have asked that question anyway, and if they got an incorrect response, they would then take that process from there. But in the examples of the DPA one that I talked about before, it's just taking out a chunk of conversation that would have had to been done manually.
Great. Got a question from Will. Do you believe that using standard or automated responses can discourage people from reviewing on Trustpilot? So suppose if you're leaving a review and just getting a canned response.
Yeah, do you know what? As a reviewer, I think that there's a couple of things why people review. If you're looking to make so firstly, right, if you had a negative experience with a company, you want to be heard, right? So, and reviews can sometimes be that last sort of like, well, I've tried to email and didn't get a response. So they're looking to make their opinion known. So they're going to look to make it public. So that's why they come to Trustpilot. So they look to leave a review to get a response. If those responses are canned and always the same, I think that looks upon the brand negatively. I think you need a positive response to a negative review will make you look positive as a company. But I think what a reviewer is looking for is that the review is going to be used and it's going to be useful. Is that going to be useful to someone else, another reviewer maybe? And we have these, we have this product now where you will get an email as a reviewer to say your review has been looked at 50 times. But I think they're just looking to be heard and also looking for what are you going to do with my review? So if there's something that you can put in the invitation to say, look, we really want your review because we really covet your opinion and it will help us improve our customer experience, then I think that has an effect on how many people leave reviews.
I think just to add on that a little bit as well, I think that especially with negative reviews, there tend to be some of the time they're just people venting because they're angry, but a lot of the time it's people giving the business one last chance to do something about the experience that they've received. And if you just get a canned response back, personally for me, and I have no empirical data to back it, I think that just sort of strengthens the negativity of why I left that review in the first place. So I think it's important to make sure that is context rich. Otherwise, for me, it just adds to that negativity further.
Great. Sydney would like to know, how quickly could a company get up and running with automated feedback if we don't have anything like that at the moment?
I think it depends on what you want to automate, which isn't particularly helpful, but I think there's a number of processes. The first point, you're going to need a system that's pulling all of your data together, because without having a rich data feed, you can't make intelligent decisions on what should be automated. Now, if you're wanting to automate responses, then you're going to need that system pulled together, and those among you that run contact center or are involved in contact center will know how difficult it is to lift and shift from one system to another. So it's not a particularly quick process to do, but once you're at a point where you've got that data together, you're looking at proof of concepts of for basic tasks like DPA. You look at around 3 to 6 months ish for a proof of concept. If you want to use things like natural language processing, you can pretty much do that out of the box, right? So as long as your system that you're using to manage all your customer care can accept or hook into those systems, then natural language processing systems are much more plentiful. There's some very, very good ones out there, and not too difficult to set up. But to be relatively unhelpful, it depends on what you're trying to automate.
I have two that kind of tie together. So Ruth comments that The Independent published today that pilotless planes could be a reality in 10 years. And Daniel had a question regarding, will artificial intelligence replace people in the next 10 years?
I think to an extent, for sure. For sure they will. I think I wrote a piece on my LinkedIn a while ago about the fact that I can go about 3 or 4 hours in the morning from my weekly commute from Manchester to London without speaking to anybody. Normally when I park my car, I will get a ticket from a human. Don't do that anymore. I'll go into the train station and I'll show my train ticket to someone who'll let me through the barrier. Don't do that anymore. And I'm at a point now where I can go through most of my day without interacting with anybody, because the classic things that I would normally have contacted someone for aren't needed for human interaction anymore. So what we're kind of seeing here really is that while automation's been, a lot of it's been sort of, I'm talking about physical process automation through ticket barriering systems mainly, we're seeing with the AI movement's going to replace a lot of the digital conversational type stuff. And I think 100% there's going to be a movement. As I say, I think it depends on the economy. I think if driverless planes can become a thing and we don't need pilots anymore, then at some point I'm sure we can sustain that. There's probably a number of trained pilots around the world that don't want that to happen, and I think that the economy has to be able to sustain itself through its automation and innovation. From piloting, it's the same thing with self-driving cars, or the basic things I say basic things we're talking about, but conversational pieces. I have a firm view that in the next decade we're going to be in a position where businesses have bots like I'm talking about now, but also consumers will have them too. Not just Alexa or Google Home that sits at home, but a piece that you can just sort of say, oh, where's my order, and walk off, and that bot will talk to another bot and come back with a result later. I think fundamentally the way that we communicate is changing, and that is going to be a lot more of the mundane process is going to be removed. I'm not sure what we will talk about if everything can be automated, but we'll see. But I think that for sure there's going to be a move. I just think it's going to be bottlenecked by the economic pushback in terms of no longer having pilots or customer service agents or whatever else it might automate.
The driverless car one's interesting because there's data to prove that there will be less crashes, and if we can understand that as a whole population that that's a good thing, then that's great. But we do have this blame game we do as a human race, and I think that if there is a crash, so there is still going to be crashes with driverless cars, and if there is a crash, who's to blame? Do you take the car manufacturer to court or whatever it is?
Yeah, and I'm kind of wandering into an area I don't know an awful lot about, but it's a question I actually do have, and it's not one I can answer. But with driverless cars, for example, if a crash is inevitable and one movement of the wheel saves you and one movement of the wheel saves a child, what does that car do? Difficult decisions. We talked about judgment earlier, and there's these difficult decisions that as we kind of invest in human kind of empathy to make difficult decisions like those, machines don't do that, and that empirically a system will make the same decision every time. And that particular example is a very, very difficult kind of piece to try and work your head around, and I don't know what the answer is to it. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty as we invest more and more kind of emphatic or complicated tasks that we're not really sure how or if ever we'll just completely hand that over to bots or automation.
Slightly more practical question here from Hannah. As a small business, how affordable is AI?
I think some is very, very affordable, as in free, and some is quite expensive. I think the great examples, the best examples of systems that you can access is things like IBM Watson, which have a massive ecosystem of all sorts of stuff. My advice, if you're wanting to just start to kind of dither with it and have a look at, especially natural language processing, is to take a look at a company called wit.ai. Now, what Wit is it's Facebook's bought and owned platform that focuses on natural language processing, but can give you an out-of-the-box, you don't need a developer to be able to start to understand how it's working, and you can use that for nothing. Their only cost is your data. So you can get up and running with something like that quite easily. Now, again, you're going to need a system that integrates with Wit to be able to do it, but in terms of starting to explore what's possible and get your head around how those systems work, something like wit.ai would be a great proof of concept example. Classically, you're looking at the cost justification of AI is that the moderate to high cost of implementation outstrips the cost of the labour that it's replacing, as well as increasing the experience that the customer sees. So I think that if your economies of scale always works best for AI, because if you're handling a lot of the same process, you can save a lot of money by saving one process. For small businesses, it's a little more difficult because your contact volumes are smaller. But looking at something like Wit can get you off the ground, and then once you understand a little bit about how it could work or what it could do, then make the decision about porting into something that would cost you a little bit more time and effort to get that running. That would be my advice anyway.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. This is probably more for you, Neil. James would like to know, well, from my perspective, I don't see how bad reviews can help my business.
Okay, so we don't talk about bad reviews. We talk about positive and negative reviews. There's no such thing as a bad review. So a negative review, someone's going to hold sentiment against your company regardless if you ask them for a review or not. So actually, the worst review you can get is the one that you never see, because you don't have a chance to then rescue that customer. You don't have a chance to see what people are talking about your company about, and you don't have a chance to learn. So you're only going to learn and you're only going to improve if you get feedback. So in this digital age, online we're all fairly naked as brands and businesses, and there's loads of different ways for people to communicate about your company, and that's what people do, right? We all have opinions about whether the best I don't know, disco there is, or best shoes, or whatever. We've all got opinions about certain things, and people will have opinions about your brand. So what better way to have one area where people have an opinion on a negative sentiment or on a positive sentiment, all in one area, all in one place where you can actually effectively manage all of the feedback.
Great. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks for your time.